What's going on, YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte, and today we are going to discuss the results from the 2025 NHL Draft Lottery. So, unfortunately, I was working last night, and I was not able to see the Draft Lottery. And to be honest with you, I had it in the back of my head, but in reality, I'm thinking, all right, it's going to be San Jose or the Flyers or the Blackhawks. I really wasn't thinking much of it. The Islanders had a 3.5% chance of actually getting this draft pick. And against pretty much all odds, for the first time really since I've been alive as a New York Islanders fan, a little bit of luck went the way of the Islanders. And the reason I say that is because, in 2000, Rick DiPietro was drafted by the Islanders, but they were the worst team in the league. John Tavares in 2009 was also the first overall pick for the Islanders. It took slight luck to get that pick, but they were the worst team in the league. Also, no real luck there. They were the worst team. They were supposed to get that pick. And now, over the years, we've seen the Islanders really go into different phases that really throughout most of the 2000s and most of the 2010s, really up until the later 2010s, the Islanders were under the Gar Snow era, and it was a team that just continually missed the playoffs, missed the playoffs, missed the playoffs. And that was just the theme of things. And sometimes they would get in, and they would get bounced in the first round. But then we started to see them make a little bit of progress under the Lou Lamoriello and Barry Trotz era. And that was the first time we really saw a real turning point for the Islanders that was different than what we saw in other regimes in the 2000s. And this is all going to make sense in a second, because I think for the Islanders here, without a doubt, this is massive for so many different reasons. We'll do a bunch of videos on what I think of the Islanders going into this year's draft, how much this is going to change things. We'll do an entire video on that for the Islanders organization. We're not going to do that today. We're going to do a mock draft, all that stuff later on. But the Islanders getting the first overall pick, massive. And this will be the first overall pick that the New York Islanders will have. In 1972, Billy Harris was the first one. Dennis Potvin in 1973. I'm wearing his jersey today. In 2000 was Rick DiPietro, and of course in 2009 was John Tavares. So it's going to be interesting to see who they will select at first overall. Like I said, we'll do an entire other video on that. But we need to look at the actual order, because this year's draft, the Islanders were not the only team to move up. So if you look at the actual order as of today, it's going to be the Islanders number 1. And then so the Islanders jumped up 9 spots. Then we saw, of course, the other team involved here that dropped. San Jose dropped 1 spot from the first spot to the second spot. And then at number 3, Chicago, they dropped 1 spot. And then at number 4, Utah actually had the biggest jump out of anybody. They jumped up 10 spots to the 4th overall selection. So that's a pretty massive jump there for Utah. Very nice to see that they could be getting a very good player with that pick. And we're going to talk about in another video about what I think they could do with that pick. At number 5, going down 2 spots, both Nashville and Philadelphia both fell 2 spots. Boston at 7, Seattle at 8, Buffalo at 9, Anaheim at 10, Pittsburgh at 11, the Rangers at 12, Detroit at 13, Columbus at 14, and then to round out the final teams that missed the playoffs, Vancouver Canucks at 15, and Calgary, which that pick ended up going to Montreal. Montreal will be selecting with the 16th and 17th overall selections in the NHL draft. So, kind of just a quick run through. Like I said, I think the real losers here, Nashville, Philly, Boston, it was tough for them because, again, those were the first 3 teams to miss and slide down, especially for Philly and Nashville, because now that puts them at 5 and 6, and they were originally at 3 and 4, which that's pretty rough. That's quite the drop. And especially for Flyers fans, because now they have to see the Islanders. They're, in division rival, the Metro Division rival, move up 9 spots after the Flyers have suffered most of the season trying to tank. But what this is an example of, and I know people will be upset in the comment section, and normally I'm upset because my team isn't the team that this happens to. But what I will say is this: the reason the NHL does this, people don't like this format. They think it's rigged. Guys, they're not rigging this for the Islanders to get the first overall pick. I can tell you that. I can promise you that. The Islanders do not get that. That is not the treatment that a team like the Islanders would get. What I will say, though, is this is going to create an environment where the NHL has teams that are competitive and teams that tank in their rebuild, like we saw with San Jose, Chicago, Philly, those teams that were trying so hard to tank. That doesn't necessarily help you. And that is the reason the NHL has this. This is to incentivize teams to basically do what the Islanders did. Was the Islanders were a team that was pushing for a playoff spot the entire season. Up until the last week of the season, the Islanders were right on the cusp of being in a playoff position. I know they were really out of it most of the way, but they were fighting for playoff games in the final games of the season. You want the NHL to have parity. You want there to be competition on any given night. You don't want, basically, for February, March, and April, after the trade deadline, you don't want to have 3 months of a team just not playing and tanking. We've seen teams that tank before. The Edmonton Oilers, right? When they had the oil change era. Nail Yakupov, Taylor Hall, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Jordan Eberle. We remember that era of the Edmonton Oilers. And that group of Oilers never found success. Right now, an example of a team like that, the Buffalo Sabres. How many first overall picks have they had? They've had 2 first overall picks in the last 7 years. And how did that work out for them? It's the way of incentivizing teams to not tank. That's what this whole thing is about. And the NHL is basically, with this, showing you, like, try and push for a playoff spot. Don't push for last place. Because the reality is, is this going to happen every year where a team like the Islanders jumps up 10 spots for the first overall pick? Most years, no. I really don't think so. But you have to look at it in the sense of the NHL is sending a message. We want things competitive. We want teams fighting it out at the end of the year. We don't want you to just assume you're going to get a top 5 pick because you're the worst team in the league. We want teams to be balanced and fighting for playoffs. And to be honest, it's not good for player development when you have a team that's just god-awful for 3 months of the season. Remember that with the Buffalo Sabres, right? Sabres are a good example of that too. They were tanking for McDavid. They traded anybody that played well on that Buffalo Sabres team. They traded them away. I remember goaltenders, defensemen, guys that were scoring a hat trick. He was traded the next night. Like, it was that crazy in Buffalo during the McDavid draft. And guess what happened? They end up getting the second overall pick. They did all that tanking, destroying everybody that was good on that team to get McDavid, and they didn't even get McDavid. Now, they did get Jack Eichel, who was no slouch, but still, right? Like, the NHL is making that a clear point. And as much as it sucks, because, listen, as an Islander fan, I can tell you, there were a lot of dark years for the Islanders where the Islanders were getting top 5 picks, right? Look at some of the last couple of top 5 picks for the Islanders. You know, I look at it, I don't think he was top 5. Maybe he was. Griffin Reinhart, who ended up getting traded in the Edmonton deal for Barzal, which is funny enough, but he never really turned into anything. Griffin Reinhart. Michael Dow Cole, right? That's a very recent example. Oliver Wahlstrom. Things haven't really worked out with him. He was not a top 5 pick, but you get what I'm saying. Just because guys are drafted in the top 5, the top 10, doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be successful. So, again, it's another reason to really keep teams from just tanking. That's really what this is all about. And I know a lot of fan bases will be upset by it, but that's the reality of where we're at today. So that's going to do it for today's video. Let me know down below what you guys think of the draft lottery results. I'm really excited to see what the Islanders do with that pick. We're going to talk about that more later this week, going into next weekend. But I'm really interested to see what happens here moving forward. So we'll talk about that later. Guys, as always, thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys again next time. Peace.